Hey everybody, it's May from Black Mountain Faith, and today I'm going to do the first 3 chapters in Exodus for our day 17 of One Story That Leads to Jesus. So just stay tuned. Okay, friends, so we are finally getting started on Exodus. As you guys know, I run a business, and I have a lot of responsibilities, and I am finally at a position with me and my friend who are designing clip art to use in the story of Exodus here. So we are finally on the same page. So I am excited to start Exodus, and I hope you guys are too. So we ended up with Jacob in Egypt, and we are now about 400 years later, okay? It says Exodus is the stage is set for a rescuer, Moses. And chapter 1 describes the need to rescue God's people. As we remember in Genesis, he foretold that Israel, his chosen people, would be oppressed and he would deliver them from bondage. Okay, so a lot of people want to say that Ramses the Great was the Pharaoh that decreed all male children from the Hebrews should die. Um, I'm a big history buff, so if you go through a lot of commentary from archaeologists and things like that, there's no real proof. It's like the timeline doesn't add up. But I did find some interesting information, and so I went ahead and wrote it in here. I personally love doing, research on Egyptian history and antiquities. I'm really big into that. So, as much as I would like to say Ramses II was, the oppressive pharaoh, I don't believe that that is true. The information I wrote down says from about 1650 until about 1550 BC, the northern part of Egypt, where the Israelites lived, was ruled by Semitic invaders that the Egyptians called the Shepherd Kings, or Hyksos. So you have to remember when Joseph introduced his family, he took his brothers and he said to tell them that they were shepherds, so they would get the best land during the famine. It kind of it made me remember that when I was writing down this information. It says many scholars believe that these kings, like the shepherd kings, were sympathetic to the Israelites and may even have been allied with them. It's easy to imagine that when these invaders were finally expelled about 1540 BC, the new rulers of Egypt were very suspicious of any Semites, including the Israelites and those who remained there. So we do know from some hieroglyphs that have been found that the Hyksos were expelled from Egypt. And the timeline here of 1540 BC, it really does add up. So the first chapter is Israel increases greatly in Egypt. And I put, despite the Egyptian oppression, God was keeping his promise to multiply Abraham's descendants. So it starts out, talking about the 12 tribes of Israel that were born to Jacob, and the descendants of Jacob were 70 persons, and Joseph was already in Egypt. But by this time, there's a new Pharaoh, and he doesn't know anything about Jacob. He just knows that these Israelites are these Hebrews are multiplying greatly, and there's a lot of them. And it says, now there arose a new king over Egypt who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the people of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, lest they multiply. And if war breaks out, they join our enemies and fight against us and escape from the land. So these people who Pharaoh referred to as our enemies would most certainly be the remnants of the Hyksos, the people that, I kind of did some research on about right here. So it says, therefore they set taskmasters over them to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses. Okay, so in modern times, these two cities are still there. They're now, bear with me in my pronunciation here, Tel El Maskahota and Quantir. It says, but the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied, and the more they spread abroad. And the Egyptians were in dread of the people of Israel. So they ruthlessly made the people of Israel work as slaves and made their lives bitter with hard service in mortar and brick and in all kinds of work in the field. And in all their work, they ruthlessly made them work as slaves. So it's just like no matter what they did to these slaves, they were still multiplying. And then we know that because God promised he would multiply that, his chosen people greatly. And he's doing it. Even in their oppression, they are still multiplying. So, the Egyptian Pharaoh is getting really aggravated, He's like, no matter what, they're still multiplying. There's too many of them. So then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Sephra and the other Puah, when you serve as midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on their birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him. But if it is a daughter, she shall live. Okay, so you have to remember here that, he's saying he's going to start killing all the women. So if you start thinking, okay, well, if you killing all the sons, you're like, well, then how can they continue to multiply? This was kind of like in commentary what the Pharaoh's meaning was behind this. It says, such a decree by Pharaoh, genocide, would not completely deprive the Egyptians of a free labor source. So he knows by killing all these sons, he's still going to have slaves. And this is his reasoning. When grown, the girls would be married to slaves of other people groups, effectively destroying the Hebrews, although he's still keeping a supply of slaves because there were more than just the Hebrews there working for Pharaoh as slaves. Okay, so it says, but the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this? And let the male children live. The midwives said to Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women. They're very vigorous and they give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. It says, and because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. So you have to imagine, here's the Pharaoh. He's got all these qualities, right? He rules this nation. He has slaves. He has a military. He has riches. He has the power to end you right now. Here are Hebrew midwives. They are poor. They have no families. They have no wealth. They have no people to rally behind them. And yet they defy the Pharaoh, omnipotent person in their country, the ruler of everything. And they're like, nope, we're not doing what he wants, because they are more afraid of God than they are of the Pharaoh. And the Lord is a friend to those who fear him. We see that in Psalms 24:14. So God is gracious and grants them the wish of a family. And I just thought that was pretty awesome. You know what I mean? So it says the Pharaoh commanded the people. Now, we're not talking about just, his taskmasters, his army. He's telling all his people, every son that is born to Hebrews you shall cast in the Nile, but you shall let every daughter live. Can you imagine taking a newborn child that is a male and just throwing him in a river? Sometimes when you're reading the Bible, you're like, oh my gosh, no wonder God weeps about the things that man does. So we come down here to the birth of Moses, and it says a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. Okay, so Levi was Jacob's third son by his wife Leah. We saw that in Genesis. So we are still in, Jacob's family line. Okay, and it says, The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. Can you imagine? There's people looking for male children every time they hear a baby crying. They're like, have you seen if it's a boy or a girl? You know, you're constantly hiding your child, trying to keep him as quiet as possible. I cannot imagine having lived through that for 3 months. Okay? It says, when she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds in the river bank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done with him. Now we know later that this is Miriam. Miriam watches as her baby brother floats in a basket of reeds down the Nile River. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant woman, and she took it. And when she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you? And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. So Miriam goes and gets her mom, Moses' mother. And it says, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the woman took the child and nursed him. When the child grew older, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. She named him Moses, because she said, I drew him out of the water. Now, there's a lot of things just here in the first part with the birth of Moses that we need to understand. Okay, so it says Pharaoh's daughter was not merely washing, but she was completing her morning devotions at the banks of the Nile. The Nile was understood back in the day by the Egyptians to be a goddess who had life-giving and healing properties. So the discovery of a baby floating in the river in the embrace of the Nile goddess would be very significant for a Egyptian princess. Okay, to her it was like, you know, the Nile has given me a child. The Nile has gave me life. You got what I'm saying? So even though it's a Hebrew child, she receives the child as if it's a gift from the Nile. So in this passage, we see that God not only saved Moses' life for his future calling, but Pharaoh's command was ignored, and Moses' mother was able to nurse her own child and even got paid for it, you know? So it's a lot to take in just a short passage. That's why I like really breaking down everything I read to understand it a little bit better. So it says, Moses flees to Midian. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. And when he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, why did you strike your companion? He answered, who made you a prince and judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. When the Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses, but Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Okay, so we need to think about this here, okay? We've watched the movies, we've seen commentary where, like, Moses grows up his entire life, and he doesn't know he's a Hebrew, okay? Well, if you read this passage right here in the Bible, we go from, you know, Moses' mother is nursing him, to it says, one day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens. It does not say that he had some great revelation where his mother came to him and said, you know what, we raised you Egyptian, but you're really Hebrew. And the fact that when he killed an Egyptian taskmaster here, it says, excuse me, the Pharaoh sought to kill Moses. Okay, we need to think about this in like real life applications here. It is most likely, according to the commentary I've been reading, that Moses grew up knowing full well he was a Hebrew. I mean, you can look at a person and know, okay, this person is this person is that. There surely must have been characteristics between looking at a person and being like, you're Egyptian, and looking at a person and being like, you're Hebrew. It is most likely, Forget the movies we've watched. It is most likely significant to understand that Moses grew up knowing full well he was Hebrew. And the fact that when this Hebrew adoptive son killed an Egyptian, that was like the cutoff for the Pharaoh. He's like, you're no longer an adopted son. You've shown your true nature to align yourself with the Israelites. And we already know that this Pharaoh wanted all the Hebrews diminished. He wanted the male children killed. Okay, so it says this incident shows Moses' courage and decisiveness, but it also shows his tendency to assume the responsibility for himself. Moses' concern for his people's welfare was good, but his timing and his manner did not accord with God's plan. He jeopardized his own privileges by identifying with his own people, the Hebrews. Now we need to realize that, yes, he wasn't one of Pharaoh's children. Pharaoh's children were taught military strategies. They got great education. They were afforded a lot of privileges. And if we think about what Moses's future calling is, it is it's very important that we understand that as an adoptive son of the princess, the Pharaoh most likely took him in and gave him the same privileges as his own children, okay? This was his nephew in a sense, an adopted nephew. So he most likely did have a great education. He understood the inner workings of Egyptian society. He had military training. I mean, Moses was set up his entire life growing up to be in a position to act out God's plan to rescue and deliver his people. So it says he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs with water to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. When they came home to their father Reuel, who is later known as Jethro, he said, "How is it that you have come home so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock." He said to his daughters, "Then where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him, that he may eat bread." And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. She gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a sojourner in a foreign land." And okay, so basically their father is like, this man, he drove off the shepherds who were harassing you, and he not only did that, but he watered the flocks. You need to go get him. This is a good man. So that's what they did. And he was so happy, he allows them in to their clan, basically. And so Moses marries, he has a child, and we later know that he lives there for 40 years, okay? It says God hears Israel's groaning. During those many days that the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. So rescue here, translated from the original Hebrew word, basically means save or deliver. And the end of this section tells us that God has not forgotten his people. It's just that he is waiting for the time to act. Okay, so the last section for today's reading is the burning bush. And it says, "Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro," okay, the priest of Midian, "and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. This verse right here, Exodus 3:6, where he says, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham. Jesus quotes this verse several times in the New Testament, and two of the places where he does it is Matthew 22:32 and Mark 12:26. Okay, so the first section of chapter 3, it's got like two sections basically. The first section is the call itself, the call that God gives to Moses to deliver his people. And the second section is about the full implication of accepting the call. So the soil around the bush is holy, while the soil on the bottom of Moses' sandals is common. And the common cannot touch holy ground without being transformed or destroyed. God is making it plain that he is other than his creation in the rest of this passage. It says, the continued slavery and distress of Israel touched God's heart. God would not only rescue them, but take them from their land to a land that was rich agriculturally, with pastures for livestock and crops, with blooms with which the bees could make honey. And we know that's true because it says, Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression from which the Egyptians oppress them. I will send you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, I will be with you, and this shall be a sign that I have sent you, that when you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. So, God is often known for the way the people who believe in God, carry out his will. But Moses is an interesting character because Moses kind of like, he's really trying to get out of this whole thing, he's got 4 protests. And the first one is that he feels he's unworthy for such a great task. And God's basic answer to him is human worthiness is of no significance to him because his presence is with that person. So therefore, that person is worthy. No matter how unworthy the person may seem, their past actions, God is with them, so therefore they are worthy. Then Moses said to God, If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me, and they ask, What is his name? What shall I say to them? So basically, you got to understand, Moses didn't grow up with the Hebrew religion, okay? He doesn't even know God's name. And he's like, if they ask me, I don't even know what to call you. I don't even know what your name is. And he says, God says to Moses, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say this to the people of Israel. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and thus I am to be remembered throughout all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and say to them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, has appeared to me, saying, I have observed you and what has been done to you in Egypt, and I promise that I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to your voice. And you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us, and now please let us go a 3 days' journey into the wilderness, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. But I know that the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So I will stretch out my hand and strike Egypt with all the wonders that I will do in it. After that he will let you go. And I will give this people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, and when you go, you shall not go empty. But each woman shall ask of her neighbor, and any woman who lives in her house, for silver and gold jewelry and for clothing. You shall put them on your sons and your daughters, so you shall plunder the Egyptians. So God is telling them, look, you need to go tell them my name. Tell them I am the God of Isaac, Jacob, and Abraham. I am the God of your elders, your ancestors. Basically, by saying that and reiterating that this is the God you've heard of throughout the generations, they know that Moses does know who their God is, that this is a message from their God. And he also knows that when they go and they ask to be let out of Egypt for 3 days to give sacrifices to God, he knows the Egyptian Pharaoh is not going to allow it. So he tells them, I'm going to strike them with all kinds of wonders, and then they'll let you go. And they'll not only let you go empty handed, they're going to load you down with silver and gold and clothes, everything you need. You are going to be taken care of when you basically, they're going to be paid their wages for having been in slavery. So that's basically where we're ending off, is with the first protest of Moses here, which is he says he's unworthy, and that also that he has inadequate knowledge. He didn't know God's name. And I am who I am speaks of a God who is self-sufficient, self-existent, all-encompassing, and without limitations, the same God their ancestors had worshipped. And that right there will be an eye-opener to the elders and to the people when he goes and says, hey, God's called me to deliver us. Because can you imagine, you've been a slave your entire life. Your mother was, your grandmother was, and somebody comes that was raised in the palace by the Egyptians. He killed an Egyptian taskmaster, and he comes back and goes, I'm going to deliver you. And they're probably like, yeah, right. So that's where we end off in chapter 3. But in chapter 4, God is going to start to show Moses powerful signs of what he can do and that he wants Moses to go and do. So I will come back on here Sunday and we will go through chapter 4, 5, and 6. So until the next reading, I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I don't like to put a whole lot of extra tabs and things into my Bible. I just like to do some highlighting, take a few notes, because I truly do try to read every single word and understand it for what it is in every single verse. So these are kind of like just study guide notes or clip notes. I don't like to write so much where when I come back and reflect, I don't know what I was looking at. And the truth is I like to use as much imagery in my Bible to kind of like be a visual of, oh yeah, that's when he married Sephora. That's when his, sister Miriam told the princess, I know a midwife, I can go get her, things like that. So until I see you for the next reading on Sunday, y'all have a nice night. Bye.